Snow came down that morning the way memory does, soft at first, then heavier, until it blurred the edges of the world and made every road feel like the wrong one. Nita sat stiffly in the back of the wagon, her fingers numb inside borrowed gloves, her breath a small ghost escaping into the cold. She was 20 years old and already felt older, as if the land had counted her years faster than people ever had. Somewhere behind her lay the home that had decided she no longer fit, and somewhere ahead was a ranch that was supposed to want her. The driver did not speak. The horses did not look back. And Nita wondered, as the white plains swallowed the horizon, whether a person could arrive at a place meant for them and still feel utterly lost. The ranch emerged from the snowfall like a thought half-remembered, dark timber, low roofs bowed under winter's weight, fences disappearing into drifts. It was quieter than she expected, too quiet for a place where a new wife should be welcomed. Nita stepped down, her boots sinking, her heart sinking with them. She carried no trunk, only a small bundle and a letter folded so many times it felt soft as cloth. When she knocked, the sound felt too loud, like an accusation. The door opened slowly, and the man who stood there did not smile, not because he was unkind, but because he was startled in a way that went deeper than surprise. Desba was 28 and already worn thin by responsibility, his dark hair dusted with snow, his eyes sharp from watching horizons that rarely brought good news. He looked at Nita as if she were a question he had not prepared for. She gave her name, her voice steady despite the cold pressing into her bones. She offered the letter. He read it once, then again, his jaw tightening, not in anger but in confusion edged with something heavier. "This isn't right," he said at last, quietly, as though the land itself might overhear. The words were not cruel, but they landed all the same, and Nita felt the familiar ache of being misplaced settle into her chest. She had known rejection before, known it in sideways glances, in conversations that stopped when she entered a room, in the careful way decisions were made around her but never with her. Still, she had hoped this place might be different. Desba explained, haltingly, that no bride had been expected, that some clerk or distant relative must have made a mistake. The world, it seemed, had erred again in her direction. He did not send her away, though. The storm was worsening and the road back was already vanishing. "You can stay," he said, not as a promise but as a fact. Shelter not belonging. Warmth not welcome. Nita nodded, swallowing the shame that burned hotter than the cold, and followed him inside, wondering what kind of staying this would be. The bunkhouse smelled of wood smoke and old leather, of lives lived quietly and without audience. Nita set her bundle down and stood awkwardly, unsure where her presence should end. Desba brought her soup, set it on the table without comment, and left her alone. She ate slowly, each spoonful anchoring her to the moment, to survival. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls like a restless animal. Inside, she sat with her thoughts, realizing that she was once again dependent on the mercy of someone who owed her nothing. The thought frightened her, but beneath it stirred a stubborn resolve she did not yet name. Morning came pale and bitter. Nita rose before she was asked to, before she could be told she did not belong. She helped where she could, feeding horses, hauling water, learning the rhythms of the ranch by watching more than speaking. Desba noticed, though he never said so. He moved around her carefully, as if afraid of misstepping, as if kindness itself required caution. He left firewood by her door at night, mended a tear in her coat while she slept. These gestures were small, almost invisible, yet they warmed her more than any declaration could have. She began to wonder what kind of man offered care without claiming credit for it. The days folded into each other, slow and deliberate. Snow muted the world, forcing everything inward. Nita's hands grew rough, her movements surer. With each task completed, a piece of her shame loosened its grip. Desba watched her work with a respect that surprised her, never praising, never doubting. Sometimes their eyes met across the yard, and in that brief stillness lay questions neither dared to ask. The ranch felt less like a mistake now and more like a pause, a held breath between what had been taken from her and what she might yet choose. At night, silence became their common language. They sat by the fire, sharing space rather than stories. Once, Desba spoke of a loss, his voice low, the details blurred as if even memory did not deserve full telling. Nita listened without probing, understanding that some wounds asked only to be witnessed. In return, she hummed an old melody from her childhood, her voice soft as snowfall. He did not interrupt. In that quiet exchange something shifted, not romance, not yet, but recognition. Two people, each shaped by absence, finding a fragile equilibrium. And still, the world beyond the ranch waited, judgment coiled and patient. Whispers arrived with the mail, with passing riders who looked too long and spoke too carefully. A native woman staying alone with a rancher was a story people thought they understood. Despa heard the murmurs and answered them not with anger, but with a steady refusal to explain. "She's here because she needs to be," he said once, and nothing more. The words reached Nita later, carried by chance, and they settled into her like a seed. Not ownership. Not obligation. Need, acknowledged without shame. It was the first time she felt defended rather than excused, and it left her breathless. When the snow began to melt, the road reappeared, thin and uncertain. Nita realized she could leave. The thought both relieved and unsettled her. She packed her bundle again, then unpacked it, her hands trembling. Despa noticed but did not comment. He only told her the truth, that she owed him nothing, that staying or going would be her choice alone. In that moment she saw him clearly, a man who did not confuse control with care. The choice before her was no longer about safety, but about dignity. And as clouds gathered once more over the plains, Nita felt the weight of that choice settle into her bones, waiting to be spoken. The snow returned the night Nita made her choice, though lighter this time, drifting down as if the sky itself were uncertain. She stood at the edge of the yard with her bundle in hand, the road stretching out before her like an unanswered question. Leaving was possible now, difficult but possible, and that knowledge pressed against her chest harder than the cold ever had. She thought of all the times she had been sent away before she could decide for herself, and she wondered whether choosing to stay could be an act of courage rather than surrender. Despa watched from the porch, careful not to intrude on the moment. He had learned that some decisions must be witnessed from a distance or risk breaking under the weight of another's hope. When Nita finally turned back toward the ranch, her steps slow but certain, he felt something loosen inside him, a knot he had carried since before she arrived. She stopped a few paces away, meeting his eyes not as a guest, not as a burden, but as a woman standing on her own ground. "I'm not staying because I have nowhere else to go," she said quietly. "I'm staying because I want to." The words settled between them, fragile and brave, and Despa nodded as if he had been waiting to hear them all along. Life did not soften overnight. The neighbors did not suddenly approve, and the world beyond the ranch did not become kinder. Yet something fundamental had shifted. Nita moved through the days with a steadiness that came from being chosen, by herself first and only then by circumstance. Despa began to rely on her presence in ways he had never relied on anyone, trusting her judgment, sharing decisions, letting silence turn into understanding rather than distance. Their connection deepened not through declarations, but through shared labor, shared meals, shared pauses that felt full instead of empty. Love, if it was that, grew like winter wheat, slow, unseen, resilient. The confrontation came on a gray afternoon, carried in by men who believed the land gave them the right to judge who belonged on it. Words were exchanged, sharp but restrained, and Nita felt old fears rise, urging her to step back, to disappear. Before she could, Despa spoke, not loudly, not angrily, but with a clarity that cut through the noise. He did not defend her usefulness or her obedience. He spoke of her worth, her dignity, her right to stand where she stood. In that moment, Nita understood that partnership was not about protection from the world, but about standing together within it. The men left, unsettled rather than satisfied, and the ranch felt quieter than it ever had before. Spring came slowly, coaxed into being by patience. When Despa asked Nita to marry him, it was not framed as rescue or obligation, but as an invitation, one she could refuse without consequence. She said yes with a calm certainty that surprised them both. The ceremony was small, witnessed by the land more than by people. Snow lingered in the shadows while new grass pushed through, and Nita felt the past loosen its hold at last. She was no longer the bride sent to the wrong ranch. She was a woman who had found a place where her presence was not questioned, only welcomed. And if you listen closely to stories like this, stories of being misplaced, misunderstood, yet quietly chosen, you may hear something meant for you as well. Not every home announces itself loudly. Not every love arrives with certainty. Sometimes belonging is built from patience, from small acts of grace, from the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. If you have ever felt out of place in your own life, remember this: the right ground does not rush you. It waits until you are ready to stand on it fully, and when you do, it holds you fast,